Good evening, America. Welcome to the Friday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you as always from Washington, D.C. and the WiredToFishCoffee.com studios. Wired to Fish Coffee is the official coffee of Just the News, and you can go right now before the end of the year, get 20% off all their great products. Their coffees, their stylish tumblers, the Just the News tumbler, brand new item there, some Christmas decorations, other great stuff. All you got to do is use the promo code Just News or point your camera at that QR code. That'll get you that great discount. All right, we are 4 days from the start of 2025 in New Year's, and are 7 days from the arrival of a new Congress, which will be fully in Republican control for the first time since 2018. And we're 24 days from the return of Donald Trump to the White House as the 47th president. And the winds of change are blowing everywhere. Just a few minutes ago, President-elect Trump, through his lawyers, urged the United States Supreme Court to delay the implementation of a federal law that could banish the social media platform TikTok from the United States. Trump's future Solicitor General John Sauer intervened in the case with a court filing. The court brief tells the nation's 9 justices that, quote, President Trump alone possesses the consummate deal-making expertise, the electoral mandate, and the political will to negotiate a resolution to save this platform, close quote. It also asked for some time to let that happen. The law, which would require TikTok to leave the U.S. or sell, is supposed to take effect on January 19th, which is the day before Trump is sworn into office. We're going to keep you up to date on that developments in that big story over at justthenews.com, so keep an eye over there. Meanwhile, as the president-elect continues to flex his muscle, the mounting damage from the departing Biden presidency is coming into clearer focus, particularly its open borders policies. Today, a new report on Just the News revealed that homelessness in America reached a record high in 2024, mostly due to the rise of illegal migrants crossing our border. What does that data tell us? It tells us that President Biden not only created a fiscal and security crisis for taxpayers in American cities, he also manufactured a humanitarian crisis by allowing illegal aliens into the country who now have nowhere to live except on the streets, just like we told you. Many times over the last few years, the Biden years forced the most inhumane way to migrate to this country, a place where the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island used to be the hopeful symbol immigrants saw when they arrived here legally. Today, it's a rape tree and maybe the possibility of being homeless on our streets. Not what we want. With that, let me turn to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head. Amanda, a lot else going on in the world today. What's on your radar?
Yeah, I just think about that with respect to President Biden's legacy. And you think about everything that has happened over the course of the last 4 years, Afghanistan, obviously most recently these pardons and commutations, illegal slaughtering American citizens, the homelessness thing that you just mentioned, political prosecutions. I don't know if that's necessarily the legacy that Joe Biden and his advisors and his cabinet anticipated him leaving the office with. And then on top of that, as you said, we have 4 days until the end of the year, 7 days until the new Congress takes place, 10 days until Congress certifies the election, and then President Trump is there, and we will start to see lots of different things taking place. But John, I saw a news blurb earlier today that over 100 Jan 6 defendants are filing a $50 billion class action lawsuit against the Department of Justice. So it's going to be interesting to see how that filing proceeds through the court system and what ultimately transpires. But I'm looking forward to our next conversation because I hear so many people doing the fear thing about bird flu. And oh my goodness, everybody's going to have to take cover. Hide your kids, hide your Wi-Fi. It's bird flu.
Yeah, last 24 hours, particularly CDC saying, hey, the virus may be mutating. There was a serious case of a human infection in Louisiana, and they have hit the panic button again. Well, that's why we want to bring in one of our good friends and one of the people who had COVID-19 right when Dr. Fauci and his team had it wrong at the NIH, at the CDC, at the FDA. He's a world-renowned doctor and chief scientific officer, one of our partners here at Real America's Voice, the wellness company. He is Dr. Peter McCullough. Doctor, great to have you back on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. All right, I want to start with the CDC. A little bit of alarm in the last couple of days with their language. Give us the latest. Should we be concerned that there's been some mutation of this virus?
The virus is destined to mutate. With bird flu has been around for over 100 years. The current outbreak is now over 4 years old. And we are seeing mutations. The man who got sick in Louisiana is in the hospital. He's going to survive. He had some dead birds in his backyard. And when they tested the birds, then tested his strain, it was different. So the conclusion is it must have mutated. So this can happen. The most important thing people can do is to use nasal sprays and throat sprays or gargles in prevention of not only seasonal flu, but bird flu. At the Wellness Company, we feature immune mist products, and they work fine for this application.
Yeah, great idea.
Dr. McCullough, I feel like one of the questions that should have been asked at the beginning of COVID is the same question that should be asked now about bird flu, which is who is the most vulnerable, who is most at risk to die from something like this? And maybe with bird flu, it's not anybody. We know with COVID, obviously, that wasn't the case, but who's the most vulnerable here?
Just like with COVID-19, bird flu is ubiquitous. So it's useless to try to isolate herds in California and quarantine them. It's ridiculous to be culling or killing perfectly healthy chickens. Just like with COVID-19, it's ubiquitous among the animals. The animals would have to, need to gain natural immunity. We've never had a human death of bird flu, but who could be vulnerable? It would be like that man in Louisiana, who's older, has medical problems like diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease. The most important thing is to use nasal sprays and gargles, and then apply early treatment for COVID-19.
Okay. So, Doctor, it sounds like we may have to come back to you in a second. There's a little bit of alarm going off there. We'll come right back to you in a second. Amanda, I think that's one of the great things about Dr. McCullough is that he lays it out in just most simple ways, which is we don't need to panic. This thing's been around 4 years. It's ubiquitous. One of the things he's been saying is all the killing of these birds, which, by the way, is what's been bringing up our egg prices to astronomical numbers, it's unnecessary. It is a panic-driven decision, not a scientific decision. It's going to be interesting with the new team, and particularly Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, to see how maybe things change radically in the federal government, which is common sense and science over panic and fear and politics.
Yeah, and look, there's a part of me that wonders if the reason why you have governing health and medical agencies out there talking about bird flu and creating, not so much of a panic as it was with COVID, but obviously raising alarm bells. It makes me wonder if there's an element of this that's testing the waters to see if they still have the same impact with the American people that they had during COVID. Because COVID, this was something that was novel to all of us. We had never experienced anything like this in our lifetime. And we, were very concerned because of all the unknowns. We were willing to do what a lot of the silly things that we now know had absolutely no foundation in science. The, 6 feet social distancing, staying at home, staying inside, staying away from others, wearing the mask that was just a piece of fabric that you bought at Michael's or Joann Fabrics.
Yeah, that's all it was.
These types of things that we just bought. Yeah, bought hook, line, and sinker. And so there's a part of me that wonders if they are testing to see if they still have any influence with the American people. But the unfortunate thing, John, is even if the bird flu was something that was very, very serious, even more so than COVID-19, I don't know if the American people are in a place of trust with the federal governing bodies when it comes to health and science. I don't know if the American people are in a place where they trust them enough to listen to their guidance now. Yeah,
and we're getting more and more data. One of the things I hope we can get the doctor back, because there's been some pretty remarkable studies in the last couple of weeks. First, vitamin D as an intervener to keep the COVID spike protein from infecting you and causing damage to your body. That was something that was in the early protocols of smart people like Dr. McCullough and Dr. Harvey Risch, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, but it was laughed at by the experts. I put that in quotes in CDC and other places, but that's turning out through study to be a very smart approach. And then on the flip side, the vaccines, which were imposed on so many people, the mortality rate seems to be growing in some new studies there. And hopefully when the doctor comes back, we can ask him about those two very big developments. Meanwhile, you've got a lot of anticipation and excitement about Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who, by the way, has been on this show many times and really led one of the first reevaluations after the pandemic ended to try to force science to start to learn from its mistakes. And he's going to be our new NIH director if the Senate approves him, which I think it will. That's a pretty big deal for all of us in America to have a fresh look after years of the same old stale look.
Yeah. Well, in his compact early on that articulated exactly the wisdom that we finally learned, what we were just talking about with Dr. Peter McCullough with respect to who is vulnerable. And that was one of the things that Dr. Jay Bhattacharya put out there. He said, possibly the young, but definitely the old, definitely the immunocompromised. And then for everyone else, you need to live your life, because when it comes to having some form of natural and herd immunity, that's the only way it's going to happen. And it's going to happen whether you like it or not. We can either, it's like they say, what's the movie? We can either do this the hard way or we can do this the easy way. And it could have been the easy way where people were living their lives.
That's
we
right.
didn't shut down the economy. We didn't completely cripple people's lives in an effort to save people. And I would argue a negligible number of people from getting COVID-19 to begin with.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Another thing that Dr. McCullough talked about, I remember when President Trump first suggested this in his first term, wouldn't it be great if there's some antiseptics we could use that could clean out the nasal passageways and your throat? And a lot of people, oh, that's crazy, that's insane. That's actually where the science is leading. And the wellness company has created these new kits that have those sort of gavage for your nose and for your throat. And you can actually sanitize and have a much less chance of getting infected. That is novel thinking, which, by the way, the CDC, FDA, and the NIH never tried to buy into. They didn't think of things outside of the box. They just had their playbook and they stuck to it even when the science showed it wasn't working. But things like that are over at the Wellness Center. You go to twc.health/justnews and you can check out those great products and get a discount because you're part of the REV and the Just the News family. Amanda, we're going to probably take a commercial break. It sounds like that alarm may have chased Dr. McCullough from his recording location, so we may have lost access to him. Before we do, an interesting poll this week, a growing number of Americans want RFK Jr. to be confirmed as the next HHS secretary. That's a big deal. I know the elites in Washington are nervous about him, but public will seems to be growing behind him. That's probably good news for President Trump as he tries to get through these confirmation hearings, which, by the way, are going to start in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, look, you get Republicans and that's it. And it certainly seems like there are fewer and fewer Republicans who are reticent to confirm him. And, you know, here's an interesting perspective because Democrats were perfectly fine with seeing President Trump's first term crippled by COVID-19, not only the economy, but the issues of public trust and just transportation in general when it came to logistics and people actually voting. Democrats had no problem with that.
Nope.
But what's interesting is that is what kind of fueled the movement behind Make America Healthy Again and President Trump's alliance with RFK Jr. So it's kind of interesting that you take something, you know, President Trump seems to be the king of making lemonade out of lemons, and that is certainly what he did with that instance.
And you talked about the consequence to our life and our children losing their learning opportunities in school and everything getting more expensive and the social isolation and depression. We're going through that again with bird flu. Bird flu doesn't really pose a significant risk to the American public right now, humans at least, and yet they're killing all these chickens, as Dr. McCullough said, and they're driving up our egg prices, they're driving up some of our meat prices, and we're paying for it even though, as Dr. McCullough said, the scientific benefit isn't proven at all by that strategy. Just drives us nuts to see how this keeps happening to us time and time again. It's deja vu all over again, as the great baseball player Yogi Berra used to say. All right, I think we've lost access to the doctor. We've got some good news. When we come back from the commercial break, Senator Ron Johnson, who, by the way, has led on the issue of getting to the bottom of COVID-19 and the vaccine damages that have maybe been causing a lot of our bodies. He's up next. He had an extraordinary interview with us a little while ago. We're going to play that right after we get back from the commercial break. Hey folks, are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness, that crick in your back holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plump, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and type 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body, found in your cartilage, your bone, skin, hair, nails, and gut. Types 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, a Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without any clumping. And you can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. Here's how you do it. Visit getnativepath.com/justnews. Getnativepath.com/justnews and start your transformation today. That is getnativepath.com/justnews.
Welcome back, everybody. As we are bumping right up against 2025, Republicans in the Senate on Capitol Hill are preparing to take over the majority. And someone who just might have one of the heaviest loads in this next term is our next guest. He is the great senator from Wisconsin and the man who will be heading up the subcommittee on investigations. Ron Johnson, sir, thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here. Hope you guys had a happy and Merry Christmas.
We did.
We did indeed, and we're going to talk about your baking skills at the end and end on a lighthearted note. But I want to get into, you have investigated so many things over the course of the last few years, but I know that one thread that you relentlessly were tugging at is something that the government has been a little apprehensive to release information on. And I think the last time we had you on, you had set a deadline for CDC, NIH, and HHS to produce records. Can you update us on that?
Well, it will surprise no one that we haven't received those records. We've pretty well been given the middle finger for the last 4 years. I have not had, subpoena power, so I can't compel testimony. And, the federal agencies know that, and so they just completely ignore Congress, which means they completely ignore the American people. So that's a recurring theme, hopefully, when I start issuing subpoenas that will gain their attention. And when President Trump gets inaugurated, to the people he has selected for his administration, they will be able to extract that information. But I think, John, Amanda, you both realize even then it's not going to be easy. I mean, the deep state does not give up its secrets easily.
Yeah, there's no doubt. We sued to get some of the data, and the judge gave us a 3-year window to wait until we can even start having conversations. It's so frustrating. Sir, I think the most important hearings that happened on Capitol Hill last year didn't happen under official sanction. They were your forums on all the things we learned about vaccine safety. And after all you've dug up, one of the questions I want to ask you is, do we have a functional vaccine safety system that adequately protects the American public based on what you found?
I would say absolutely not. What we have, and this isn't just unique to our federal health agencies, I think this really applies across the board to government, is the capture of these federal agencies by the corporate interests that these agencies are basically established to regulate. And listen, I don't necessarily blame the businesses. I mean, they react as anybody would, trying to protect their business. You have a government, which is power. And as Lord Acton said, power corrupts. And so you have power, and you have these businesses that are saying, well, how can we survive over taxation, over regulation? Well, they're pretty smart people. So they figure out not only how to survive over taxation, over regulation, how to game the system, is they actually learn how to take over the agencies to their benefit and to the detriment of their competitors, which means to the detriment of the American public. So that's what's happened across the board. I think what happened during COVID, it opened up our eyes to the extent of that capture, the extent of that corruption. And so bottom line is, you have big pharma, they pay for their own studies. You've got to have these random controlled placebo trials. They're very expensive. So the only people that can't afford them are the pharmaceutical companies themselves. They hold the data. I think if you want evidence of the corruption, is just take a look at it was the FDA that went to court to protect the Pfizer trial data on the mRNA injection for 75 years. Now, I'm sure Pfizer would have gone to court to protect them too. They didn't have to, because the federal agencies went to bat for them and tried to keep that information, which should have been made publicly available almost immediately, secret for 75 years. So that's the level of corruption. That's how deep the state is. That's what we're still, you're suing, other people are suing for FOIA. That's what we'll have to subpoena to get that information out.
Yeah, no doubt.
Senator, one of the most important conversations you had that has really taken the world by storm and gone viral was the conversation you had with folks like Casey Means and the Food Babe, and I know you've communicated a lot with RFK Jr. with respect to a lot of the food guidelines and vaccine guidelines. When it comes to what we can do to improve that space, to increase transparency, to protect the American people from some of these harmful food dyes, and a lot of the things that you discussed in that forum, coming up on the new administration with Republicans at the top of Senate, and hopefully with RFK in there as in his position as President Trump's appointee, what do you anticipate will be some of the first proverbial heads to roll when it comes to these issues?
Well, of all the testimony we had in that September event, the best little snippet came from Dr. Chris Palmer. He's a psychiatrist, who's done a lot of work in terms of nutrition's impact on mental health. And he said, they don't want to discover the root cause. And that's a big problem. Eisenhower warned us, in his farewell address, not only about the military industrial complex, of course, we ignored that warning, But he also warned us about public funding of basic science and research. He said it would create a scientific and technological elite that would drive public policy. I mean, that's Anthony Fauci, Francis Collins, and the others. Now, I would go further. I'd say it would corrupt science. When you pay for science, you get the result you want. So from my standpoint, job number one is we have to restore integrity to science. If it's going to be public funding, we need outside independent boards with everybody at the table. I just don't want one side. I just don't want the food nutritionists at one side. I want big ag at the table. I want big food processing. I mean, everybody has to have input, and it's got to be transparent. People have to see it because science isn't perfect. Scientific consensus is probably the least scientific term I can think of. You need people pushing the envelope. You need people asking questions. But that's the bottom line: is those of us, people like RFK Jr., they haven't even been allowed to ask the questions because, going back to Chris Palmer's testimony, nobody wants to know the answer, or at least the big corporate interests don't want to know the answer.
Yeah, you certainly do, and you've pressed hard for it. Senator, if we don't have a functioning vaccine safety and transparency system, when the government says a vaccine is safe, is that assurance really based in science right now?
Well, I would argue not really, because we don't have true placebo trials of any of the vaccines on the childhood schedule. They're tested against other vaccines. Yeah. So if another vaccine has a certain level of adverse events, you test a new vaccine, has the same level, you go, oh, that sounds safe, but we never tested the original one. So again, you have to take a look at, in totality, what is the rate of vaccine injuries? We really don't know. I mean, VAERS, we've had a Harvard study that, prior to COVID, only 1% of adverse events was actually reported to the vaccine adverse event reporting system. So it dramatically understates the number of vaccine injuries. So that's a problem. It's very difficult because there's money on the line. In order to get compensated, you have to prove that whatever health condition you have was caused by a vaccine. There's such a reluctance within the medical establishment, within our federal agencies, to actually link a vaccine to any kind of health outcome. So we've paid out very little from the vaccine injury compensation fund, virtually nothing to the one designed for COVID. The best solution for this is actually make these products safer and do real science to determine, are there certain conditions that make you more vulnerable for an adverse event? Again, we haven't even been able to ask the question because everybody in the industry just wants to rely on the safe and effective rhetoric and look no further.
Yes, sir. Let me follow up on that. Robert Redfield was at a panel with you, I think just last week. He said it's time to remove the liability protections for vaccine makers so that the courts can get more involved. Your thoughts on his idea?
First of all, I agree with that. I've been saying that for quite some time.
You have.
That original 1986 bill did not provide liability protection for the vaccine manufacturers. That was a wink and a nod agreement that they did it by regulation about a year later. Yeah. So it really never was not the intent of that bill to completely, obliterate vaccine liability. Now, I would say there has to be some limits to it. We do want drug companies to be able to research and produce new life-saving drugs, but it has to be based on real science and it has to be transparent. And they've got to fess up to when their drugs or their vaccines cause harm. Again, we have to know the truth about these things, and right now we don't.
Yeah, so important.
Senator, connecting the vaccine issue along with what we were talking about on that food forum, I know the last time we had you on, you talked about these 10,000 ingredients deemed GRAS, generally regarded as safe, and the fact that we have 10,000 in the United States and about 400 in Europe. I know these are food dyes and things like that go into these everyday products, but is there also some crossover with vaccine ingredients?
There may be. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor, not a medical researcher. But I thought that was pretty shocking testimony that, again, as you said, Europe actually approves ingredients. They have 400. We do it based on GRAS, generally accepted as safe, or generally recognized as safe. And we have 10,000 ingredients. There's probably an ingredient or two that might be harmful. Again, I don't want to be Chicken Little here, saying the sky is falling. Our life expectancy, by and large, has been increasing over the last few decades. So we're doing something right, but chronic illness rates are way up. Autism is way up. We have to get to the root cause of what is causing that. I mean, to have a child with autism, I can't imagine. I just can't imagine that kind of lifestyle. I mean, that's a lifelong burden. It's an awful thing, and we need to do everything we can to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. Sir, I want to turn to just one fun thing because on Christmas Day, you put out one of my favorite photos of the holidays. You baking some extraordinary cookies, including a new Donald Trump cookie. I know you make these yourself. Tell us a little bit about the Donald Trump cookie and how that came to be.
Well, instead of going out shopping, this is my gift to my family. So I've been making cutout cookies for literally decades. And generally, they're just Christmas trees. I'm a manufacturer, so I set up pretty much a production line, and I just crank out Christmas trees. My son sent me the Donald Trump cutout this year. Had to include that at least for this year. So it was a little more work, a little more effort, a little more detailed work, but I enjoyed it, and I think people like eating them. They're very tasty.
And were you paying your labor force in the form of cookies?
I'm the labor force, so yeah, I definitely paid myself.
Good, very good.
It's amazing. My wife is generous of that. My wife is actually jealous of that counter. That was the biggest counter I'd ever seen. I may have to do a renovation because of that.
Me too. Senator Ron Johnson, we are very much looking forward to what you will be doing next year in the Senate. Thank you so much for being here, sir, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. We've got much more on the other side. We'll be right back.
Hey, America, Donald Trump has done it again. And with his presidential victory and a red wave sweeping the House and Senate, conservatives are back in the driver's seat. But as the fight to restore America begins, now is not the time to get complacent. That's a good piece of advice. You have the chance to be part of this movement, not just as a voter, but as a member of a powerful organization that takes its marching orders directly from you. AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. I'm a card-carrying member. AMAC is the conservatives' alternative to the AARP. We stand for faith, family, and freedom, and we're fighting for the values that make America great. Join AMAC today for only $1 for your first year. What a great deal. That's right, you heard me, $1, but don't wait. The special offer ends on December 31st. Donald Trump is building his team, and you can be part of it. Join AMAC today and help us continue the fight for a brighter, freer future. Visit amac.us/justnews now to claim your $1 membership and make your voice heard. That's AMAC, amac.us/justnews. Together, we can keep the momentum going. Welcome back, America. A lot of big developments in the Asia Pacific today. Another South Korean president, the acting one, impeached by the Democrat Liberal Party there. In addition, the news we had at the top of the show, right? Donald Trump asking the Supreme Court to stay or stop a new U.S. law from taking effect that would cause TikTok to divest or move out of the United States. I thought we'd bring in one of our very best experts on China and Asia. He's the author of a brand new book. I just got done reading it. It's fantastic. Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. Great, great book. He is one of America's greatest security experts. He is our friend, Gordon Chang. Gordon, welcome back to the show. Congratulations on the success of the book as well.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Amanda.
All right, let's start with the news that just broke a little bit ago. Donald Trump asking the Supreme Court, hey, let's hold off for a while. Don't let this law take effect. Kind of gives China maybe a little leverage. What do you think is going on there?
I think President Trump is looking for a deal with China. But the issue here is that you don't negotiate, especially with the Chinese, by making a preemptive concession. And that's what this is. Because what he's doing is he's giving them something really important before he actually is able to nail down an agreement with the Chinese. I think that you just let TikTok run down, which is what would happen when it's no longer allowed to be on the App Store. Yeah. And that would force the Chinese to sort of observe a timetable. And that would make it, I think, giving Trump a lot more leverage than this way of making this preemptive concession.
Yeah, very interesting.
Gordon, I want to ask you about China with respect to their provocations of Taiwan. It certainly seems like President Xi has some extra moxie, some extra wind in his sails. I don't know if it's because of this new amphibious ship that he has or the increase in nuclear warheads, but something seems to be giving him a boost of confidence. How does President Trump communicate to President Xi, either now or after he's officially inaugurated, to stop this?
Well, I think the first thing that the President Trump needs to do is impose costs on China. You know, we have for decades tried to entice the Chinese into good behavior by making concessions first. And that's why I talked about TikTok and why I didn't like that move. What I think President Trump should do is impose his tariffs And there are a number of other things that the president has been talking about, which should be done right away. And then you let the Chinese come and beg for concessions. That's the only way to deal with someone as arrogant as Xi Jinping.
Yeah, great point. There's been a lot of saber rattling. Obviously, the rollout of a new amphibious ship, largest, I think, deck carrying ship that has been made in the world. Some new stealth planes. But a lot of the intelligence analysts I'm talking to tell me that Xi is trying to project strength while internally he's got problems. The yuan is underperforming as a dollar in China. You've got a real estate crisis there, and also now manufacturing profits way down. Is China's economy in a little bit of trouble right now?
It's in a lot of trouble. It's not growing at the 4.6% pace that they claimed for the third quarter. It's somewhere around zero, maybe a little bit above, maybe a little bit below. But there are a lot of underlying statistics which indicate the Chinese economy is in distress. And a lot of them are price data points. So, for instance, the producer price index, which measures factory gate prices, has now been down something like 26 straight months. The consumer price index is barely above zero. In reality, it's probably below zero, but they won't admit that. So you cross the board, the Chinese economy is ailing. And Xi Jinping, his solutions are just making things worse.
Wow. And is some of these military announcements designed to maybe distract a little bit internally in the country?
Yeah, I think the Chinese people, I think Xi Jinping understands that war would be extremely unpopular right now because the Chinese people are gloomy. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about punching property prices. Property accounts for about 70% of the wealth of the middle class, and yet property prices are falling double digits. I think what Xi Jinping is doing, and this is just a guess, John, but my guess is that he is saber rattling because he wants to make other Communist Party leaders on the back foot. He wants to prevent them from challenging him. So I think that this is a sort of an elite Communist Party move rather than one meant to move the Chinese people.
Yeah.
Gordon, I want to follow up on the tariff thing for a moment because I agree with their economy seemingly bleeding. I think that that's something that really would have some teeth. But I'm also concerned about retaliatory action by President Xi. As we saw a few weeks ago, the ban on three critical mineral exports, antimony, germanium, and I can't remember the other one. However, we have our own supply, at least to some degree, in Idaho. What do you anticipate his reaction would be to tariffs? Is there something in the critical mineral space that might actually be punishing for us as well?
I think they've done pretty much what they can do. And we got to remember that their export embargoes have not worked in the past when it comes to rare earths. The Chinese tried this in 2010 against Japan, and that effort failed after 2 months. The one thing that when you look at tariffs, in 2018, when President Trump imposed his Section 301 tariffs, China picked up somewhere between 75 to 81% of the cost of those tariffs. And they had to because they were dependent on exports. Today, Amanda, China is even more dependent on exports because Xi Jinping has turned his back on consumption as being the basis of the Chinese economy. His only plan, therefore, to rescue a grim situation is to export more. Tariffs would close off some part of the U.S. economy, but more important, it would inspire other countries to do the same thing. That would be great for us.
Yeah. Gordon, I want to turn to the other big news today in the Asia-Pacific Rim, a second impeachment of a second conservative leader in South Korea. A lot of people thinking this one a lot more suspect. I've been saying for some time, I've been worried about the state of democracy in South Korea. How dire is today's developments?
I think South Korea is at a critical stage because the Democratic Party of Korea has now had these impeachments of both the president and the acting president. They are intending to use democratic procedures to destroy democracy. The Democratic Party of Korea does not believe in the continued existence of South Korea. It wants to merge South Korea into North Korea and perhaps do so on North Korea's terms. We know that the leadership of the Democratic Party of Korea, which is known as Minju, is very pro-North Korea, very pro-China, very anti-US. And although we say our military alliance with South Korea is ironclad, we believe that. I think that if there's going to be a Democratic Party of Korea president, it is going to be an alliance that could very well be terminated. Most people in South Korea want the alliance to continue, but maybe that doesn't matter if the leadership of the Democratic Party of Korea believes that it can get what it wants. So this is going to be a very critical time for our relations with South Korea.
Yeah, and all subjects that you cover so brilliantly in your Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, a must-read book. Gordon, what an honor to have you on the show, and early Happy New Year to you. Thank you for all you do for our country.
Well, it's an honor for me to be on your show, and thank you, and Happy New Year to both of you, John and Amanda. So thank you.
Thanks. Great conversation as always. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk to a Trump advisor about how President Trump will shake up Washington, D.C. in 2025. Oh, by the way, it's already started. We'll have more of that right after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. I don't think it is a secret that many people went to the booths on Election Day this year to vote against the D.C. establishment. And with President Trump's rhetoric on the campaign trail and a lot of his actions his first term in office, that was one of the biggest reasons to end up pulling the lever for President Trump. So how exactly can President Trump expand on that and improve upon breaking apart that cabal that sits there in Washington, D.C. with us to discuss this as advisor to President Trump, Michael Glassner. Michael, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Amanda. It's great to be with you tonight. It's a real honor.
We're happy to have you, and we are a few days out from the new year, and then after that, it's going to feel like warp speed, and President Trump's in office, and then the real work begins. And in your Newsweek article, you talked about the shakeup that's got to take place with respect to the D.C. establishment. Talk to us about some of those first moves President Trump can make to actually move towards accomplishing that.
You bet. Well, I think we've already seen it happening, right? On day one, the world, the media, the world started treating President Trump as if he was the president again. And he's really been de facto acting president since he won the election in November. So I think you're going to see that continuing. You know, the speed with which he rolled out his cabinet was really mind-boggling. He got all the major cabinet appointments were done before Thanksgiving. And then it's been a very consistent rollout of Trump supporters, his colleagues, his allies that have been named to posts all over the world, including, of course, in Washington, D.C. So, and many of those have been met by great dismay by the Washington establishment, which in my view is a very good sign. You know, the whole President Trump's entire game plan since 2015 has been running against the establishment, upending the status quo in Washington, and really empowering the working men and women of the United States. And, you know, he powerfully carried that message in 2016 and even more so in 2024. So I think that he has a tremendous mandate. He won the popular vote by a large margin. He won the Electoral College by a large margin. And, you know, his message just resonated very powerfully, particularly in 2024. The American people know him. They knew what they were voting for. And I think that he's going to have a tremendous success and continued backing of the American people to change Washington in a lot of great ways.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think American people are counting on it. They know what they got when the president, which is very exciting. One of the things that I've been really fascinated by is sort of the relationship the president has with Elon Musk and how fearful people are that Elon Musk and Donald Trump together are going to form a pretty big duo when it comes to shrinking the size of government. Is that $2 trillion figure that Elon Musk has kind of put out there, which, by the way, a lot of people like, is that a reasonable figure to think could be cut from the bloated budget?
Well, I think it is. I'll tell you this, John. I was in Butler, PA for the first and second Trump rallies. When Elon Musk showed up at the second one, you know, I was backstage with the president. When they met, it was, you know, instantaneous energy. You could really see that they were brothers in arms. There was a great chemistry between the two, and I think we've seen that since then. You know, when he bounded up on that stage, jumped into the air, you knew that it was going to change the game, and it certainly did. I mean, the amount of work he did and the dollars he spent, particularly in Pennsylvania, were really amazing. I think made a huge difference. So, you know, his emergence on the Trump train has been extremely welcome. He's obviously extremely brilliant, accomplished, genius, and I think, you know, working together with President Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy, I think they can make real change. That number is huge, but the amount of waste and corruption in the government is also huge. So, you know, it's a target-rich environment for the DOGE, and I think it's going to be very successful. He has the full backing of the president. He's obviously a very smart guy. He's been successful in so many areas. The government is different, moves a little slower, it's sclerotic and bureaucratic. So I think the change can be affected. I think it's going to take more time probably than he expects, but obviously, the president and he together are a formidable team, and I think you're seeing that on Capitol Hill already. They're going to have a lot of strong backing from the chairman of the DOGE committees. They've got a great agenda, and I fully expect that they'll be successful.
Yeah, no doubt.
Speaking of Capitol Hill, Democrats are most certainly going to push back on President Trump and his agenda, maybe to a lesser degree because I think what happened on November 5th hit them like a clothesline, so there seems to be a bit of soberness. But with respect to Republicans, President Trump also had a lot of pushback from Republicans in 2016 until the end of his first term. What do you anticipate the support for President Trump is going to be this time around from Republicans who might be a little establishment-y?
Yeah, right. Well, there's a lot of those still, if you can believe it. They're much fewer, particularly in the House, right? Those members that voted to impeach President Trump have been obliterated. I think you're going to see a much more disciplined approach out of the White House in particular. Susie Wiles is a tremendously strong leader, the incoming chief of staff. She ran a great campaign along with the president and her team, of course, which I was a proud member. So I think you're going to see a much more disciplined approach in pushing the agenda on the Hill. I think it's going to be much more clear cut. Everyone knows exactly what his agenda is. His support for immigration reform, for cutting taxes, strengthening the military. It's all very clear. And again, I referenced this before. The mandate he got in the vote is undeniable. There's nothing that politicians on the Hill fear more than a angry electorate at them because they're not supporting the president's agenda. So I think they're highly motivated to get behind him as much as they possibly can. So there will be some members, who will drag their feet, who are still in denial. They believe the pre-Trump Republican Party still exists. It really doesn't. I think that's been made clear over it's been nearly a decade I've been on his team. The party has changed so radically during that period. And I think that Capitol Hill will come to recognize that as time goes by. They're a little slow sometimes. The election, they want to be in denial about the power of his reelection. But I think that you'll find that the disciplined approach by the president and his team is going to make their agenda much more clear. It's going to pass, and I think it'll be a much better outcome for the country.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt indeed.
John and I mentioned this at the top of the show, but I think with President Trump and his agenda, we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way. But I think President Trump is determined this time around to get it done no matter what. Trump advisor Michael Glassner, thank you so much. Welcome to our show, and we'll have you back on again very soon.
Yeah,
Thanks so much. Thank you. All right.
Take care. All right, everybody. When we come back after the break, we thankfully got Dr. McCullough back, so we're going to talk to him and finish up with a few of our questions on the other side of this break. Welcome back, everybody. There was an alarm, but thankfully there was no fire. So joining us again is world-renowned doctor and chief scientific officer at the wellness company, Dr. Peter McCullough. Dr. McCullough, welcome back.
Thank you. False alarm, just like Deborah Birx is signaling today on CNN about bird flu.
Yeah.
You know what? I wanted to start off with the sugar situation, but let's start with that because Dr. Deborah Birx has been out there trying, I don't know if she's trying to offer wisdom or maybe just her perspective, but it hasn't seemed very helpful. I know you have some helpful tips. Give it to us.
Birx is suggesting that all the dairy and chicken farmers do weekly PCR testing, which is completely useless because it'll just raise false positive tests. Instead, the practical advice is to use a nasal spray and throat spray or gargle twice a day. Wellness company, we feature Immune Mist. Povidone iodine effectively kills bird flu.
Yeah, so important. The simple things that it seems like Dr. Birx and others in our health establishment just keep missing. I want to talk about some amazing research because you've been tweeting about it and I think really helping people understand that the science data is catching up to your original analysis. First, there is a real concern about the mortality rate now in these new studies on the COVID-19 vaccine. Tell us about that. And then secondly, there's also some important data about vitamin D as an intervener, particularly with the spike protein.
You know, the FAQ and the package insert for the COVID vaccine never claims that the vaccines reduce the risk of death. They've never made that regulatory claim, but yet FDA Commissioner Robert Califf, as well as Coronavirus Committee Chairman Brad Wenstrup, have actually made these false claims that the vaccines reduce the rate of death. In fact, they don't now. Multiple studies out showing those who took the shots more likely to die if they develop COVID-19.
Yeah, and these are peer-reviewed. These are important studies, right? These are not junk science, right?
No, they're fully peer-reviewed studies, and the biologic rationale is that if the body keeps getting loaded with the spike protein from the vaccines, it simply can't fight off the next attack from SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah, important stuff.
Dr. McCullough, I know that you have put a protocol out there for people who have had the vaccine and maybe they've gotten boosted, for some people who are still experiencing adverse effects from the vaccine. And I actually just sent the protocol to a friend of mine recently. I was frantically scanning through my text messages. But can you talk to us about that protocol?
Yeah, I have over 2 years now of direct clinical experience with McCullough protocol-based spike protein detoxification, the combined use of nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. Not Wellness Company, we have it in a single capsule called the Ultimate Spike Detox. 2 capsules twice a day as a starting dose. It helps clear spike protein from the body. It's the best chance we have of detoxifying after SARS-CoV-2 in the vaccine.
Yeah, it's so important, and it was so right then. It's even more right now as people become to appreciate your early wisdom on this. Dr. McCullough, is there a similar protocol now, or is it the same protocol when you look at bird flu and other emerging viruses?
It's the same protocol with respect to nasal sprays and gargles. Now, Wellness Company, our contagion kit features oseltamivir as the first-line antiviral. Even in that serious case in Louisiana, the mutation indicated that he would have responded fine if he had a Wellness Company emergency kit at home. Instead, he stayed at home for days, if not weeks, before he went into the hospital. So if there is a human case of bird flu, treat it early. Wellness Company contagion kit.
Yeah, very smart.
Dr. McCullough, I want to ask you, I love scientific research. I love scientific advancement and, moving forward in the fields and finding new remedies for things and new technologies in medicine. But sometimes common sense and old school wisdom reign supreme. And one thing we've constantly talked about is that with COVID, it should have been a public health initiative where people were told to go outside, get exercise, talk to friends who are healthy, get vitamin D. Those things still reign supreme when it comes to just keeping a baseline of health, don't they?
Every study done has shown vitamin D has a positive effect. It helps prevent viral infections like SARS-CoV-2 and influenza, and then it's actually used in active treatment at higher doses. I recommend for patients 10,000 units of vitamin D3 plus 100 micrograms of vitamin K2 now in common supplements.
Yeah, and it works. So I want to talk about something you and our colleague, Dr. Gina Loudon, talked about sugar. When you got a respiratory infection, particularly an upper respiratory infection, sugar actually makes things worse, not better, right?
Right. We should never advise on drinking sugary drinks like colas or Gatorade. They can have 30 to 60 grams of sugar, and give Dr. Gina credit. She was right. Tea with honey, a teaspoon of honey is only about 5 grams of sugar, but a natural sugar, and even Manuka honey from New Zealand has medicinal properties, is actually antiviral, shown in preclinical studies. So much better off going with tea, Manuka honey, or just non-sweetened forms of fluid replacement. Much better than drinking sugary drinks or having sweets during the setting of an acute illness.
What about something like maple syrup?
Maple syrup is probably a little bit more on the side of refined, so I'd stick with the medical literature here and go with tea and honey.
I got it. All right. I have tried very hard to switch out in all of my baking something like monk fruit or honey or even stevia, but sometimes good old maple syrup is all that will go on pancakes for me. Dr. Peter McCullough, thank you so much for your wisdom on all of these things. We appreciate having you. We'll get you back on again very soon.
Good to have you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it for us tonight and for this entire week. We hope you all had a wonderful and blessed Christmas week. And look, next week, New Year's Eve, and then it's the new year. It's 2025. We appreciate all of you for being here with us this week. Everybody have a blessed and very safe weekend, and we'll see you on Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern on Real America's Voice.